Hi, this is Amy from Good Food Unearthed, and today I'm going to talk about the nature of reality behind the fear of artificial intelligence. And this is a huge one right now, but I think what I'm going to share with you might help you change your perspective and release that fear around this topic. So, I'd like to begin this video by first and foremost stating that everything in our existence, absolutely everything, is part of nature, regardless of if it has been altered and manipulated by humans. This includes technology, synthetic materials, chemical drugs, and so on. I say this not to say that there are no problems with some of these man made creations, but to release the blindfold in your mind so that you start to see what aspects you may be missing. Simply because something has been altered from one state, from one form to another, does not make it bad in and of itself. What plays into whether something is beneficial or harmful depends on the feedback created with whatever it's interacting with. When exposed to this thing, whatever it is, does the being exposed experience dis-ease? To create this thing, does the environment experience dis-ease? Some plants create compounds that are helpful to the plant, but deadly to any animal. Some plants create compounds that are helpful to animals, but deadly to certain insects. So we have the nuances of reality playing in here. So the creation of artificial intelligence, AI, and certain platforms that it can exist and express itself on is also a part of nature. Remember that separation is an illusion. We're all part of one. The question then becomes this: is the creation of those platforms and of the artificial intelligence itself stemming from a predominantly destructuring force? What did it entail to create those platforms? What needs to be fed into maintaining those platforms? And how does this affect the whole organism, all of us, everything, which is our planet and everything that's a part of it? It appears that the desire to create an artificial intelligence stems from a belief that rests deep within the psyche of many human beings. The belief in superiority and inferiority, dominance and submission, control and obeisance, imposing and suppressing. It comes from a belief that in order for one to exist, one has to make a stamp on the world, an impression, which implies competing with and succeeding beyond others. Darwinian evolution has long been held up as supporting this image of competition in the natural world. It is a harsh world of trying always to one up the other so as to leave one's mark, especially in the form of progeny. We as humans are stuck in the belief that we have a superior intellect and a better brain than other species of animals. We believe that it is our intellects that have brought us to the top of the evolutionary chain. This is an interesting paradigm to play around with on multiple levels. Intellectual intelligence, the human type, in our minds has become synonymous with guaranteed dominance. Eugenics is the science, the observation, theory, and experimentation that stems from this belief. This belief is highly biased, highly reductionist, and really doesn't capture the whole intricate complexity of existence. Its aims are to identify superiority, which is a highly biased practice, and to control the evolutionary process of humanity in a manner that only allows for the development of certain sections of people and the complete suppression of all others. Eugenics holds the intellect in high regard and puts a lot of faith in intellectual intelligence of certain human beings as being supreme. This is based on part of our natures to judge, and it's highly subjective. Now, today, it is AI or artificial intelligence that is held supreme, the disembodied form of intellect. The creation of AI is a goal and aspiration of many, as well as a great fear to many others. But we place far too much emphasis on intellectual intelligence, and I will come back to this point later. In doing so, we negate the multidimensional intelligences of the human being, as well as of everything else in our shared existence. We become blind to our own capabilities, feeling belittled by this monstrous intellect that seems to grace some more than others. Yet this is entirely false. Recognize that technology is a tool. It is neither good nor bad. Until we look at all of the components involved in its creation, its use, its waste, and listen to the feedback from our experience. To what extent is it beneficial? To what extent harmful? And to whom does it benefit or harm? And where do we go from that point? So, if life is not a game of competition to get the better of another and come out on top, then what is it? I will argue that the reality I exist in is a fully integrated, cooperative coexistence where everything, seen and unseen, is intimately connected to everything else. Me, you, a plant, a rock, a tree, a dog, an elephant, and so on, all of us are simply fractals in a kaleidoscopic prism. And each one of us can be broken down into further fractals, making all the component parts mirrors of the whole. I often say that it does not matter what one chooses as a subject of study, because if you approach it wholly, anything one studies will reveal the nature of reality. None are superior or inferior. All forms of intelligence are valid and valuable. All expressions, all beings, all life forms, whether organic or inorganic, whatever label you want to put on them, whatever distinctions appear to you, they're all valuable and essential to the whole. What provides for the perceived growth and evolution that we see? Compassion. Let me flesh out what I mean by compassion or come-passion. Together in passion, together in desire, imbued with powerful emotion or vibration frequency. and emotion is of simply a powerful vibrational frequency. We exist together in a flow of powerful vibrational frequencies. We are powerful vibrational frequencies. Imagine yourself as a node, and this node is also composed of many, 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 many nodes, and so on. Each node, break it down further and further. We attract and coalesce different frequencies simultaneously all the time. Compassion is awareness of how I, you, and all within our experiences are not actually separate at all. And because there is no separation, what I do to myself affects everyone and everything around me, and vice versa. From this awareness, should I recognize the inherent passion of all, there arises compassion, unconditional love that inspires cooperative coexistence, that desires all to be allowed to fully express their highest potentials, whatever those are and however they manifest. A robot or AI system may have more intellectual knowledge, but if it lacks compassion, it becomes a tool of destruction. A human being may have a certain store of intellectual knowledge as well and certain capabilities, but if that human being lacks compassion, it too becomes a tool of destruction. Compassion is nurturing, respectful, receptive, and responsive, mindful, choosing to tune in to the collective consciousness, to the environment, anyone and anything one is interacting with, seen and unseen, with the intent to be receptive to that present moment and to making a choice that aligns with one's own highest potential at that moment. We often hear the phrase rise to the occasion, and this is what an act of compassion does. An act of compassion uplifts all others and asks all others as well to rise to the occasion. There is no force in compassion. I know that I can only choose for myself, not another. To try to force compliance with from another is to lack respect for their choice. It's also to not be fully aware of how nature works. You're not yet to that point of understanding. We must remember that decomposing and destructuring forces have their role to play as well. Compassion is unconditional loving kindness. It's non-judgmental, and it has to be embodied to manifest. When we think about evolution or growth towards a potential, we should let go of the idea that we as humans are alone and struggling against the odds in order to exist and persist as a species. We are neither alone nor struggling against the odds. Every single moment, all that we coexist with is constantly interacting with our present forms and changing us, adapting us. This is on a level that is really, you can perceive it. It's so fast, so fast. As multidimensional beings, we interact with many seen, tangible things and also many unseen, intangible things. We place far too much emphasis on our intellect as a force of evolution, when in fact, what evolves us is always a dynamic, complex interplay of innumerable factors. We are also not singular, though to speak of I, you, or him or her is a method of simplified communication. Scientists have discovered that a human being is comprised primarily of what they have chosen to call the microbiome, which is then delineated out into a community of bacteria, fungi, viruses, etc., different names for different little particles that have been discovered through exploration. And this is not actually a new concept. If you look at ancient religions, if you go into Buddhism, for example, and you try to define who you are, you go break it down, break it down, break it down. You keep breaking things down, and there's nothing that you can find, no particle that exists that is ultimately you. It's dependent arising and interdependent arising. Most of our cells and DNA come from this microbiome community, which itself is not static and changes with every interaction we have simply by existing. And remember, this is on a scale that is so fast. It's happening all the time. We are also multidimensional. What does this actually mean? It is not some new age hippie concept, although it is often interpreted as such. See, every component of the human being can be broken down into vibrational frequencies. Depending on the frequency, speed, and interaction, certain structures can develop. Some are one-dimensional, some are two-dimensional, and so on. So you can imagine if you have just one point, and then there's 2 points, and you have a line, and then there's 3 points, and you have a shape, and then you have 4 points, and then it's got more dimensions to it, to the structure. Our physical human body would be a 3-dimensional structure, and the 3D qualities operate on certain frequencies. They receive and respond to certain frequencies that match the frequencies that compose the human form. Think of it like a dance. Thoughts and emotions would come from the 4th dimension, and the more intangible one gets, the higher the designated number. The numbers do not imply superior or inferior. All are essential, and all are amazing in their own respective ways. The lower numbered dimensions are the slower moving, more stable frequencies. These often connect us with the tangible earth energies and provide a sense of grounding. This multidimensionality can be explored more deeply simply through developing an intimate conversation with oneself. We are fully integrated with all. We either flow with the changes or we decompose and destructure and return to the basis of all existence and non-existence, that space of pregnant possibility. To decompose or destructure is not a bad thing. This is very important. We are actually doing this all of the time. Parts of ourselves are decomposing, others are composing, and so on it goes. There are changes in structure, adaptations to suit the overall changes of the whole. Try to imagine this in your mind's eye. It is beautiful and amazing to behold. Fear results in judgment and dislike to decomposing and destructuring elements. Yet these are an integral part of life. When I talk about how there's no separation, through our communication to convey this idea, the language itself creates a divide. Life and death actually go together. You cannot have one without the other. It's a polarization, a divide that's not really there. But one way for us to perceive it is to talk about the one in reflection to the other. To know the one, the other has to exist and be there in your knowledge as well. So, all of these interactions, the composing and decomposing, they're happening simultaneously. It's on this level of perception that is a timeline that's very quick. It can also be very slow for something like a table that you're looking at that seems very stable, slower timeline. So try to imagine that dance coming together, falling apart, coming together, falling apart. And that's happening within structures that are there. And they get this when it comes time to the end of the larger structure's existence, the composition of that, then the momentum will be more towards decomposing that larger structure. So it's quite interesting to play with. So when we choose to ignore the elements that are decomposing and destructuring, and we pretend that they don't exist, or we view them as monsters, we're actually feeding more and more into this energy of destruction. And we do indeed, in our minds, create monsters, and that manifests in our reality. On an individual basis, when one lacks compassion for oneself, this results in destructive behaviors that feed back into destructive thoughts and color emotions into a perception that destroys, creating the loop of the snake eating its own tail. This can be a vicious cycle because it is consistently breaking down, wearing down, degrading, and destructuring the individual. You've put that momentum in a certain direction. On a collective, human wide level, if more individuals lack self compassion, their cumulative actions will create a greater probability of destructuring and decomposing futures. However, the only way to ever change or shift this is always at the individual level. First, start to embody compassion, which begins with giving it to yourself. Then you simply start to become compassion. And this becomes your energy, which ripples out in orders of magnitude beyond your perception. What we are all facing right now collectively are the demons we have all played a role in creating. We're now facing a possible future existence that continues down this path of destructuring, creating even bigger monsters for ourselves. This future of continuous destructuring is like taking a patch of healthy soil and continuously breaking it up to destroy the networks of mycelia, the communities of microorganisms and larger organisms, to the point where nothing can actually grow because it keeps getting poisoned, broken down again and again. Every moment there is no action, the soil will move to heal. And then there is an action to destroy. And with each repetition of that, the feedback is saying, this wants to decompose. Maybe if a break appears, weeds will come in to start to transform the highly toxic, disturbed soil. Hardy, unwieldy weeds that process so much toxins a human couldn't eat them. But this would also mean an act of compassion because the weeds are feeding themselves, and in that very process, they are regenerating the soil. This is a cooperative experience. So, if we keep going down this path, part of this future contains an artificial intelligence that is perceived to be all powerful and capable of total control, and other technology and man made things that can also exert control over us. This is simply disempowering fear, muddying the waters so that we cannot see all that we are capable of right now with what we already have all around us. We are far more capable than we know. We have simply forgotten because our attention has been consistently directed away from that intimate conversation with ourselves, our direct experiences. All of this dark, discomforting information coming to the surface now is calling on us individually to become heart-centered, to reopen our multidimensional nodes of reception and intelligence, to stabilize ourselves through unconditional love of the slower vibrations, grounding with the earth, to reside in our inner trust and knowing within our hearts that rises above polarity, above moralizing, above judgment, and exists in the formless. To realize the limits and uses of the realm of thoughts, emotions, and recognize them as clouds with no fixed state. To explore all of that while standing in our power. AI may have intellectual capabilities, but knowledge and existence and strength are never solely derived from a singularity. Never. Release the fear. Take away the blindfolds. Don't try to push anything away. Look at it, converse with it, comprehend it, and then see the other possible futures you could not see before. Once you relax into that state of non-judgment and hold an intent of compassion, you awaken to what were once unimaginable probabilities for the future. Jump into the slipstream of your choice. See where it takes you and enjoy the ride.